Coronavirus pandemic has triggered panic across the globe. It's an airborne respiratory disease which causes serious shortness of breath, and also severe illness might end up in multiple organ failure. American President Trump once called it a China virus in his recent press meet. Affected cases crossed 2 million and the death toll reached 126,000. Before the coronavirus, the human race has had to deal with various epidemics and pandemics across the centuries. Many of them have claimed millions of lives, and as the coronavirus racks up the numbers, we take a look at the virus' deadly predecessors. Ebola virus. Unlike coronavirus, it is an epidemic which was first identified in 1976 and still existing in the African continent. In other names it is also called as Ebola, hemorrhagic fever, or Ebola. Initially found in two simultaneous outbreaks. One in Zara, a town in South Sudan, and the other in Yambuku, Democratic Republic of the Congo, a village near the Ebola River from which the disease takes its name. In July 2019, the WHO declared the Congo Ebola outbreak a World Health Emergency, and it is still registering numbers along with the coronavirus pandemic. The fruit bats were found to possibly carry the virus without getting sick. The virus spreads through direct contact with body fluids, such as blood from infected humans or other animals, and also occur from contact with items recently contaminated with bodily fluids. Signs and symptoms typically start between 2 days and 3 weeks after contracting the virus, with a fever, sore throat, muscular pain, and headaches. Vomiting, diarrhea and rash usually follow, along with decreased function of the liver and kidneys. At this time, some people begin to bleed both internally and externally. The disease has a high risk of death, killing 25% to 90% of those infected, with an average of about 50%. It has affected 33,000 people and caused 14,200 deaths since its existence, and it is still counting. Rabies. Rabies is a fatal but preventable viral disease. Rabies is caused by lyssaviruses and is commonly known as mad dog disease, hydrophobia. Some say it was first reported in 1804 and still rarely existing. Rabies is a viral disease that causes inflammation of the brain in humans and other mammals. A deadly virus spread to people from the saliva of infected animals. Rabies is usually through an animal bite, for example, from stray dogs. Rabies is present in more than 150 countries and on all the continents but Antarctica. These symptoms are followed by one or more of the following symptoms: violent movements, uncontrolled excitement, fear of water, an inability to move parts of the body, confusion, and loss of consciousness. Once symptoms appear, the result is nearly always death. In 2010, an estimated 26,000 people died from rabies, down from 54,000 in 1990. The majority of the deaths occurred in Asia and Africa. There are an estimated 59,000 human deaths annually from rabies worldwide. Swine flu. Novel influenza H1N1 or swine flu is common throughout pig populations worldwide. People with regular exposure to pigs are at increased risk of swine flu infection. It is also called as a pig flu, swine influenza and hog flu. As of 2009, the known SIV strains include the subtypes of influenza categories. The 2009 swine flu pandemic was an influenza pandemic that lasted from January 2009 to August 2010. Influenza viruses are commonly known as seasonal virus, which can be found in every winter. Though this virus is exactly similar to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, it is named after its way of transmission, which is swine. It was first reported in 2009, and WHO has officially declared that the pandemic was over in August 2010. It is an airborne disease which will be spread when people with certain infections like cough, sneeze, or talk. Influenza viruses infect the cells that line your nose, throat and lungs. The virus enters your body when you inhale contaminated droplets or transfer live virus from a contaminated surface to your eyes, nose or mouth. It has been estimated that there are 700 million to 1.4 billion people affected across the world. Actual fatalities ranged between 12,000 and 18,000. However, in a 2012 study, that estimated more than 284,000 possible fatalities worldwide, with range from 150,000 to 575,000. Dengue. Dengue fever is a mosquito-borne tropical disease caused by the dengue virus. They are also called as dengue or break-bone fever. In 1779 to 1780, the first confirmed, reported outbreak of dengue fever occurred almost simultaneously in Asia, North America, and Africa, and it is still exists in different parts of the world. This virus is a mosquito-borne virus because it was spread by some species of female mosquitoes across the world. Symptoms may include a high fever, headache, vomiting, muscle and joint pains, and a characteristic skin rash. A vaccine for dengue fever has been approved and is commercially available in a number of countries. Dengue has become a global problem since the Second World War and is common in more than 120 countries, mainly in Asia and South America. About 390 million people are infected a year and approximately 40,000 die. Hong Kong flu, influenza A, H3N2, or 1968 flu pandemic was a flu pandemic outbreak in 1968. This pandemic struck in two waves, with the second wave being deadlier than the first in most places. First wave lasted since the 13th of July, 1968 to early 1969, and the second wave from late 1969 to 1972. It was caused by an H3N2 strain of the influenza virus, descended from H2N2 through antigenic shift, a genetic process in which genes from multiple subtypes reassorted to form a new virus. The Hong Kong flu strain shared internal genes and the neuraminidase with the 1957 Asian flu, H2N2. Like swine flu, this is also an airborne disease which will be spread when people with certain infections like cough, sneeze. Hong Kong flu symptoms include headaches, fevers, muscle aches, sore throats, coughs, runny noses and sneezing. Severe symptoms include coughing up blood, difficulty breathing and chest pain. It has affected 3.5 billion people around the world, while the pandemic infected an estimated 500,000 Hong Kong residents, 15% of the population. In total, the virus killed 1 million people worldwide and around 100,000 people in the US. HIV. The human immunodeficiency viruses, HIV, are two species of lentivirus that infect humans. Over time they cause acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, a condition in which progressive failure of the immune system allows life-threatening opportunistic infections and cancers to thrive. In most cases, HIV is a sexually transmitted infection and occurs by contact with or transfer of blood, pre-ejaculate, semen, and vaginal fluids. It was first reported in the year 1981, and it still exists in different parts of the world. Scientists claim this was initially transferred from chimpanzees. The CDC, in search of a name and looking at the infected communities, coined the 4-H disease, as it seemed to single out homosexuals, heroin users, hemophiliacs, and Haitians. An HIV vaccine can be either a preventive vaccine or a therapeutic vaccine, but unfortunately, we don't have a dedicated vaccine to treat this virus. As per the report, there are about 37.9 million people were living with HIV around the world in 2018, and an estimated 770,000 people died from AIDS-related illnesses in 2018. Cholera. Cholera is one of the worst pandemics ever existed in the history. Cholera is an infection of the small intestine by some strains of the bacterium, Vibrio cholerae. It was also called as Asiatic cholera, epidemic cholera. It had created not just one outbreak, but 7 outbreaks in the history at different times starting since 1817. All 7 pandemics are: first from 1817 to 1824, second from 1826 to 1837, third from 1846 to 1860, fourth from 1863 to 1875, fifth from 1881 to 1896, sixth from 1899 to 1923, seventh pandemic from 1961 and still persisting in different parts of the world. Except the 7th pandemic, all other cholera pandemics were originated from India. It is a waterborne disease which spreads through water medium. It is spread mostly by unsafe water and unsafe food that has been contaminated with human feces containing the bacteria. The classic symptom is large amounts of watery diarrhea that lasts a few days. Vomiting and muscle cramps may also occur. Diarrhea can be so severe that it leads within hours to severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. This may result in sunken eyes, cold skin, decreased skin elasticity, and wrinkling of the hands and feet. Dehydration can cause the skin to turn bluish. Cholera affects an estimated 3-5 million people worldwide and causes 28,800, 130,000 deaths a year. It has registered over 10 million estimated deaths so far since its existence. Spanish flu. The Spanish flu, also known as the 1918 flu pandemic, was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic. It is the same category as swine flu, which is influenza A, H1N1 virus. Newspapers were free to report the epidemic's effects in neutral Spain, such as the grave illness of King Alfonso XIII, and these stories created a false impression of Spain as especially hard hit. This gave rise to the name Spanish flu. The 1918 flu pandemic lasted till 1920, but caused millions of deaths in this short span all over the world. Initial symptoms of the illness included a sore head and tiredness, followed by a dry, hacking cough, a loss of appetite, stomach problems, and then, on the second day, excessive sweating. Next, the illness could affect the respiratory organs, and pneumonia could develop. Most influenza outbreaks disproportionately kill the very young and the very old, with a higher survival rate for those in between. But the Spanish flu pandemic resulted in a higher than expected mortality rate for young adults. The Spanish flu infected around 500 million people, about a quarter of the world's population, and also the death toll is estimated to have been anywhere from 17 million to 50 million, and possibly as high as 100 million, making it one of the deadly pandemics in human history. Smallpox. It was an infectious disease caused by one of 2 virus variants, variola major and variola minor. In other names, variola and red plague. Reports claim that smallpox was first spotted in 1500s and lasted centuries, and officially declared eradicated in 1980 by WHO. It was spread as an airborne, skin-skin, blood products disease. The initial symptoms of the disease included fever and vomiting. This was followed by formation of sores in the mouth and a skin rash. Over a number of days, the skin rash turned into characteristic fluid-filled bumps with a dent in the center. The bumps then scabbed over and fell off, leaving scars. Smallpox was a devastating disease. On average, 3 out of every 10 people who got it died. Eradication of smallpox is considered the biggest achievement in international public health. In 18th century Europe, it is estimated 400,000 people per year died from the disease, and 1/3 of the cases resulted in blindness. Smallpox is estimated to have killed up to 300 million people in the 20th century and around 500 million people in the last 100 years of its existence. Black Death. When people think of the deadliest diseases in the world, their minds probably jump to the fast-acting, incurable ones that grab headlines from time to time. The Black Death, also known as the pestilence and the plague, was the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history. Plague, the disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. It was also commonly called as bubonic plague. It was first identified in 1347 and ended in 1351. Bubonic plague is mainly spread by infected fleas from small animals. It may also result from exposure to the body fluids from a dead plague-infected animal. Bubonic plague causes fever, fatigue, shivering, vomiting, headaches, giddiness, intolerance to light, pain in the back and limbs, sleeplessness, apathy, and delirium. It also causes bubbers. One or more of the lymph nodes become tender and swollen, usually in the groin or armpits. Though smallpox has registered 500 million deaths in the history, Black Death is considered the deadliest among all other diseases ever existed in human history because it has registered 75 to 200 million deaths in a very short span, unlike smallpox registered those numbers over centuries.